Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us at the Canada Aviation and Space Museum and online via Zoom for the 9th Annual Kenneth Molson Lecture Series. My name is Erin Gregory. I am the curator here at CASM, and I will be your MC and moderator for this event. Our parent organization, Ingenium, acknowledges that our sites are located on unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation. Across all our sites, we are taking strides to adapt and improve operations with truth and reconciliation in mind. We welcome dialogue as we continue to build on this work in collaboration with Indigenous nations and organizations. This evening will consist of 4 presentations, followed by a question and answer period with our speakers, and then a reception afterward. Please note this event will be in English, but for those attending in person, both live French translation and ASL interpretation will be available. For those online, English or French audio captions, as well as ASL interpretation, will be available. I would now like to invite Chris Kitson, Director General of the Canada Aviation and Space Museum, to the podium to say a few words.
Thank you, Erin. Good evening, everybody. Mesdames et messieurs, ladies and gentlemen. Je m'appelle Chris Kitson. Comme Erin a dit, je suis le directeur général du Musée de l'Aviation et de l'Espace du Canada, l'un des 3 musées d'Ingenium, les musées de sciences et de l'innovation.
I'm the director of one of the 3 museums.
The 2025 edition of the Kenneth M Molson Lecture Series. This year, we explore a critical and timely topic, some would say a hot topic. I'm known for one thing around here, and it's punning, so that was a low-grade one. Aerial firefighting in Canada on rotary wings. As wildfires become more frequent and severe, the role of helicopters and drones in suppression efforts has never been more vital. Tonight, we are fortunate to hear from leading experts who will share their experiences in piloting these aircraft, advancing firefighting technologies, and tackling the unique challenges of battling wildfires from the air. At the museum, of course, we are dedicated to preserving Canada's aviation heritage, including the helicopters that have played a pivotal role in search and rescue. But Ingenium is also committed to sharing stories about current and future science and technology innovations. Tonight, we are here today focusing on an adult audience, but we are also developing and delivering programs on these topics to youth. In recent years, for example, we have expanded our experiential learning programs and our focus by developing initiatives like our drone zone, where students can come in and learn to pilot drones and explore their real-world applications. Through our broader aerospace experiences program, we are also working alongside government, industry, and academic partners to develop programs that inspire the next generation of aerospace professionals, turning curiosity into career pathways. In the Aerospace Academy, for example, students undertook a variety of drone-related challenges, including using math to map out flight paths for drones in fire and rescue scenarios. These activities were designed to showcase the ways in which drone technology can be leveraged to solve real-world problems. Working with industry mentors, like our esteemed colleagues here tonight, a number of those students also engaged in even deeper studies of drone technology, researching and developing solutions to specific issues faced by the aerospace community, including some that were related to aerial firefighting and reforestation. The students recognized the challenges that we face as a very large country and were keen to bring their creativity to the table to find new ways to innovate. These programs and experiences have opened the eyes of the students while also opening doors for them into potential careers. These career opportunities were often very invisible to them. So it's important that we have evenings like this and we share Canada's expertise and innovation. We are 6th in the world when it comes to aerospace and innovation, and yet most kids, most Canadians have no idea. So these are all opportunities for us to share those stories in a variety of different ways. We are now actively working with government, industry, and educational partners to expand and to deliver into other provinces and territories. The work of aerial firefighters and the technologies they use are at the intersection of history, innovation, and education, all of which are central to our museum's mission. We are honored to bring this discussion to you tonight, and I'd like to extend my gratitude to our distinguished speakers for their knowledge and their expertise. I'm really looking forward to this. I would also like to express a special thank you to the Ingenium Foundation and to the Kenneth M Molson Foundation for their generous support in making this event possible. Robert Eldridge, the president of the Kenneth M Molson Foundation, is here with us tonight. For 9 years, Robert, you have been giving us these opportunities on evenings just like this to showcase a wide range of fascinating topics, and for that we are extremely grateful. I would like to take this opportunity to invite Robert to come up and to say a few words.
Well, it's a great pleasure to see such a good turnout for the 9th lecture series. And we're just delighted that you can be here, and we're most grateful to the museum and to the Ingenium Foundation for making it all possible. And we look forward to continuing the lecture series and hope to see you again next year. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, Chris and Robert. Please join me in welcoming our first speaker of the evening. Dr. Shalene Haynes is a prominent figure in wildfire management, currently serving as a key expert at the Canadian Forest Service, CFS. With extensive experience in fire behavior research, fire weather, and drought impacts on wildfire activity, Shalene has made significant contributions to the understanding of how environmental factors influence fire regimes in Canada. Her work at the intersection of science and operational fire management has positioned her as a thought leader in promoting evidence-based practices for wildfire prevention and mitigation. Shalene's role at CFS includes advancing wildfire danger reduction strategies, collaborating with national and international partners, and contributing to major initiatives that address the increasing complexity of wildfire management in the context of climate change. Known for her strategic thinking and dedication to capacity building, she is deeply involved in efforts to develop tools and models within the Canadian Forest Fire Danger Rating System. That would be better as an acronym. The primary decision-making tool used by wildfire management. Please welcome Dr. Haynes.
Thanks very much, Erin, and thank you for inviting me here to speak, and thank you also to Jared for getting me here, and yeah, thanks to all of you who are coming to listen. And we have a lot of acronyms in fire, but I'm gonna keep them to a minimum here. Okay, next slide. Can I change them? Oh, here we go.
Yeah, so just that
Excellent, okay. So just a general outline of what I'm going to talk about. So I'm going to give you guys a general Canada Wildfire 101. So just some of the big scale things that influence fire on the Canadian landscape. Then I'm going to talk about the fire regime across Canada. So in Canada, that's typically the area burned, the number of fires, their severity, the seasonality of fires that occur. And then I'm going to give a little bit of information about the long-term trends that we've been seeing in fire across the country. So in between each of these sections, I've got a little bit of eye candy, and I tried to throw in some pictures of planes. I am not an expert at all on aerial suppression. The folks that will be chatting after me, you can ask about these different aircraft and such, but hopefully I can give you a little overview of fire in Canada. So when we talk about fire, we really first need to talk about fuels, and forests are fuels. So 362 million hectares of forest occur across our country, which is about 40% of our land area. The boreal forest is the majority of that. Approximately 75% of our forested land is boreal. So it's important to keep in mind that fire is a natural disturbance in the boreal forest. And that boreal forest is that green area that that dark and light green area across much of the northern parts of our country. So as I mentioned, the boreal forest is evolved around fire. So many boreal forest species have serotinous cones. So these cones require heat to open the cones to distribute the seeds, and they require mineral soil exposure to regenerate. So this type of burn severity requires very intense stand replacing crown fires. So you need that heat up into the crown to open those cones, and then you need that intense fire to burn that organic material on the forest floor to expose the mineral soil so that these trees can start to regenerate. So the next thing that we need to think about when we're thinking about fire in Canada is where the people are. So this map is just showing the general population, where the population is distributed across the country. We have approximately 41 million people in our country, and 90% of us live within the 100 kilometers of the US border. So, we saw where the fires are largely in those northern areas, the people are largely in the southern areas, but we still have those areas of intermix or interface where we have forests interfacing with where people are, and that's approximately 4% of the forested area. So it's really, when we're thinking about where people are when the forests occur, we have this map here from my colleague Lynn Johnston, and it's showing, in the red area in the map is where we have a lot of the burned areas, and in the blue is where the people are. And we can see that most larger fires occur away from densely populated areas in northern regions, again, where that boreal forest is occurring. And the interface areas are a bigger suppression issue because that's where our values are. That's where, where the people are and where the values are, suppression is more focused. And that largely influences the spatial pattern of forest management in Canada, which is going into my next slide. So operational fire management is carried out by the provinces and territories and by Parks Canada federally on park lands. So fire suppression, that includes firefighting crews, the management of fires, coordination of resources and equipment, largely it is carried out by these folks. And so areas that receive full suppression, so all fires receive active suppression, is essentially that green area on this map. And then modified suppression is in areas where most fires are left to burn naturally, and that's largely the gray area in the map. This map is from a little while ago, so it's a little dated. The province of Ontario practices an appropriate response, where each fire is individually dealt with to determine the level of response. But in general, in that green area, you're getting more full response versus in the gray areas, you're getting more modified response. So hopefully that gave you a general picture of some of the major factors that influence where fires are occurring. And so now I'm going to go over some information about the fire regime in Canada. So first we're going to talk about area burned and number of fires. So over 8,000 fires occur each year in Canada that burn approximately, on average, 2 million hectares. So the majority of these fires, so 97% of these fires are small. And in Canada, we consider small fires to be anything under 200 hectares. So the remaining 3% of the total number of fires that occur represent 97% of the total area burned. So the majority of fires that occur are in areas where suppression efforts are low in the north, and where extreme fire weather is common, typically in the north and some of the western parts of the country. So now when we talk about frequency, intensity, and seasonality, so less than 1% of the forest land in Canada burns annually. When I show I'm going to show in the next couple later slides the burning that we had in 2023. That was 4% of the forested area, so a lot larger, but that's not what typically we burn each year. Fire intensity is usually less for spring fires compared to summer fires, generally because spring fires are, it's cooler, the humidity is typically higher. And fire intensity is generally greatest for crown fires in the boreal region. So that picture on the bottom is showing a crown fire where you have like full engagement, tall flames up into the crowns of the trees, versus a surface fire where you just have fire along the surface of the forest floor. The fire season in Canada starts in late April typically and peaks in July and generally ends in October in the country. Fires are caused by humans, either through recreation, through industry, and to a much lesser extent, arson, and by lightning. Human-caused fires occur predominantly in the spring, close to populated areas, and lightning ignitions are more common in the summer months when we have more lightning storms that come through the country. But in general, it's a 50-50 split between human-caused and lightning-caused fires, depending upon the season and the region. So now I'm going to go over some of the trends that we've been seeing in terms of the fire regime across the country. So we wrote a paper in 2019, and it looked at the trends in the fire regime from 1959 to 2015. And then in recent years, we had fires like in 2023, and so we updated that. And I'm just showing you guys, before we publish the update, some of the things that we've seen. So on the x-axis, sorry, the y-axis on the left side, we have area burned in millions of hectares. And then on the other y-axis, we have the number of fires. And this is from 1959 to 2024. And I should just note that the numbers for 2024 are preliminary numbers. It takes us a while to finalize everything that happened the previous fire season. So one of the things I want you to point out, sorry, first I should say the orange bars are the area burned. The gray line on the top is all fires that occur, and then the black line at the bottom is the number of large fires. So again, large fires are anything greater than 200 hectares. So the one thing I want to point out is it's really variable year to year, how many fires occur and the area burned. And as I mentioned previously, on average, we burn 2 million hectares across the country. But some years we burn a lot more. If we look at 2023, we burned a lot more. Prior to 2023, our largest area burned on record was in 1989 when we burned just about 7 million hectares. So when we look at the number of fires, again, it's quite variable. It's also interesting to note that in 2023, we burned a really large area, but we didn't have a lot of fires, outside of what was the norm. So what we've seen, and I'm not showing it here, but I'm just going to point out that we're also seeing that fires are getting bigger. And as I mentioned before, majority, so that top gray line is showing you that, all the fires that occur, but as I mentioned, 97% of those fires are typically small. So that black line at the bottom is those big fires, and you see those big fires that only make up 3% are what makes up the majority of those orange lines in terms of the area burned. So these graphs here now are just basically the same graphs that I had before, but now we've added trend lines to them. So we've looked at the trend over time, and what we are seeing is that the area burned is increasing. It's almost doubled since 1959, and that's continuing over time. We've also seen that the number of fires is decreasing, and we think that's predominantly due to the human-caused fires, and we think that's largely because of education, that people are realizing that, when there's a fire ban, we shouldn't be burning, and recognizing the implications of fires, particularly in those interface areas where we have values that people care about. And we're also seeing that the number of large fires is increasing, and we think that's largely because of lightning ignitions. Those lightning fires, because they typically occur in those areas where we don't have people as much, and so we don't have as much suppression, and we often just let those fires burn, as I mentioned before. So now if we look at regional variations, so these maps are basically, we've taken the country and broken it up into ecoregions. So an ecoregion is an area that has similar vegetation, similar climate, and when we look at these ecoregions, we can start to identify the trends in terms of area burned on the top set of maps, and then in terms of number of fires on the bottom set. And in terms of area burned, the darker red colors represent higher increasing trend in area burned, and where I have put dash marks on it means that we have more confidence statistically in those results. So in those areas, we're seeing a lot more area burned, particularly in boreal regions. But we also see some regions that are relatively stable, but we don't, in terms of area being burned, see any regions that are decreasing. We do see some areas that are decreasing in terms of number of fires, and largely I think that's again to do with human-caused fires decreasing, and we are seeing some stability, but again, number of fires and area burned have been increasing over time across the country. So with that, hopefully I've given you a good overview of fires in Canada. Some take-home points that I'd like you to take home with you include that wildfires in Canada are typically large. 200 hectares, when I talk to international counterparts, those are pretty big fires. Fire is a natural part of our forested ecosystems in the country, and not all fires are suppressed. That isn't possible, nor is all fire unwanted. So there are, again, regions where we want fire to regenerate those forest ecosystems. And year to year, there's a lot of variability in fire activity. Not all years are like 2023. We don't expect them to continue to be like 2023, but the trends are showing that we are expecting more fire on the landscape and that fire suppression will continue to be an important piece of the puzzle going forward. And with that, I'll say thank you. Sorry, I forgot to put this one up. If anybody, any questions that aren't answered, welcome to email me about them.
Thank you, Dr. Haynes. That was super interesting, and I think sets us up very nicely for the next 3 presentations. I will now welcome our second speaker of the evening. Nitin Sareen is head of marketing with North America Airbus Helicopters. Nitin joined Airbus Helicopters Canada in 2008 and has served in various roles across the organization in Canada, the US, and France. He has over 20 years experience in sales, marketing, and business development across aviation, automotive, and capital equipment sectors. In his current role, he leads North American marketing for both civil and military lines of business and is dedicated to the Airbus goal of pioneering sustainable aerospace for a safe and united world. Mr. Sareen will provide an overview of Airbus and the ways in which their helicopters and helicopter modifications are used in fighting wildfires. Please welcome Mr. Sareen.
Thank you. Thanks. Hello, everyone. Great to be here, and thank you for the opportunity for inviting me and speaking on this very critical mission. Some of us from the helicopter community industry were last week at what we used to call earlier Heli Expo and now is called Verticon. Paul and I can still get over that, but you know, it kind of sounds more like Comic-Con, but it is the biggest helicopter show in the world, and we were in Dallas last week and obviously showcased our products and the critical missions that we serve with our products. And we can't emphasize enough on how firefighting, you know, over the last few years has become even more critical. So yeah, I'm gonna, through the next 10-15 minutes, talk to you about what our product range has to offer with respect to that. Then, of course, I know Paul is going to be speaking after me, so he is going to provide more kind of detailed insight into it because he has an operation that basically does this every year with his fleet across the western part of the country. So before I step into it, I just wanted to take a moment to talk about Airbus. I hope everyone knows Airbus. But I just wanted to just quickly summarize what the Airbus Group is all about. You mentioned in the introduction the vision of Airbus, which is all about basically pioneering sustainable airspace for a safe and united world. And really, we can't emphasize sustainability enough in whatever we do across the Airbus Group, and that basically translates into helicopters as well. Then, of course, we have, in the division, we have the commercial aerospace or airplanes division, as well as the defense and space division. But coming to sustainability, just to give you an example of what really, we take this very seriously. It's not a buzzword for us. Last week, we were doing a bunch of demonstrations at Verticon with 4 of our helicopters. We did about 64 flights and for 200 odd customers. And all those flights were basically using SAF, Sustainable Aviation Fuel, so that we can, you know, contribute our little bit to decarbonizing the aviation sector. And Airbus is absolutely committed to that. Then, of course, you know, sustainability goes beyond just fuel that we put in our aircraft or our operators put in the aircraft. So we think firefighting goes in the direction of that sustainability as well. That is very important to us and what we're doing at Airbus Helicopters. Just to talk briefly about Airbus in Canada, our basically heritage in Canada goes back 40 years now. Last year, in fact, we celebrated 40 years of being in Canada. And actually, the first foundation of Airbus Group in Canada was laid back in 1984 with MBB Helicopters Canada back in the day that provided a fleet of helicopters to Canadian Coast Guard with the BO-105. If you look at the Airbus Group today, we are making a significant impact on the Canadian landscape. We are contributing to the Canadian economy with the revenue that we have up there, with jobs, the direct and the indirect jobs that we have, as well as you're seeing year on year Airbus fleet in Canada increase across fixed wing, across helicopters, and across all of the other products that we offer. I would also like to share with you, just last year, we were also selected by the Canadian Air Force for their next fleet of ab initio training helicopters, where we will be providing our H-135 to train the next generation pilots with the Canadian Air Force in the next few years. And then, of course, A220, has been a success story. It's born here in Canada. And if you look at, just the long-term forecast with that airframe, and that's the only commercial airline outside of Europe, which is built here in Canada for us, it will contribute significantly into the landscape, into the Canadian economy and the job landscape. Now coming to, I don't know what happened. Coming to helicopters, my favorite. So, yeah, helicopters do a lot, right? We all know, they serve multiple missions. If we were to look at the Canadian landscape for helicopters, when you look at the total fleet, there's about 2,500 helicopters that are operating in Canada. You can divide them between turbine helicopters and piston engine helicopters. So bulk of them are turbine helicopters. That's the business that we are in. We produce turbine helicopters only, so there's about 1,800 of those. And 75% of those serve basically what we call the commercial utility business. So they do a variety of tasks, including fighting fires. Then there's, of course, the air medical side. There is the public services side, which is including law enforcement, including the RCMP that basically boasts a fully Airbus fleet. And then there is other sort of segments in it, tourism, aerial transportation, which is part of the landscape. So before I dive into the firefighting subject more, I have a little video to share with you where you will really see the essence of how helicopters are contributing to battling wildfires every day around the world. So that video looks really cool, but fighting fires is anything but cool if you talk to operators and if you talk to people that are on the ground. Dr. Haynes shared a bunch of statistics with you guys already, so I'm not going to spend too much time here. But again, we looked at some data as well. You know, we obviously, as Airbus and as helicopter community, rely on this secondary data that's available to us. And we see clearly that, that the intensity of fires and the longevity of fires is increasing. It's what we see globally as a trend is fighting fires is not just a season thing anymore. This is becoming a year-long affair. We've seen that recently with what transpired in Los Angeles. And if you look at the 2023 stats there, basically the 4 years that are listed here, 2023 exceeded that in terms of the units. And that shows that this is a serious crisis that we're dealing with globally. And then, of course, in Canada, if you really look at the Canadian 2023 fire season, the carbon that was emitted through those fires was nearly 4 times than all of global aviation combined. And that's all coming down on our cities and our towns, and you know, we're breathing that. So this is a major challenge that we have in front of us. And then on top of that, if you look at the tree loss, there is something about forest fires which is quite natural. You know, forest fires is not a new phenomenon. It has existed forever. But the intensity and the severity and the way it's increasing is really alarming, because if you see the tree loss that we had in 2023 here in Canada alone, it is pretty significant. And that, I can tell you, gets the entire helicopter industry to take notice and take action. And so now if I was to just quickly sum up in terms of what helicopters do when it comes to fighting fires, there's a variety of missions that helicopters do. You know, you probably saw that to an extent in the video that I played. But there are some key missions that I'd like to highlight. Transporting, when a fire incident first surfaces, is perhaps one of the most critical aspects of using a helicopter, because that can really help control the fire before it becomes bigger. So through initial attack teams or any other sort of equipment that needs to be brought to the area, a lot of times which is inaccessible by road, helicopters play a critical role. Then, of course, as these fires increasingly are happening closer to communities, built-up areas, evacuation and rescue is also a big part of what helicopters do. And then there's the reconnaissance and mapping. So obviously identifying hotspots, making sure that you have crews, because there is a whole ecosystem out there to fight fires. It's not just that there's a bunch of helicopters that are doing it alone. That requires a lot of coordination between the ground crews and people in the air, and then other scientists included, people that are working round the clock to curtail the fire. That's also a big part of what helicopters contribute to. The command and coordination, and then actually attacking the fire, are other two very critical aspects of fighting fires. And as we were talking to some of our operators, even last week, we did a little panel discussion on the Airbus booth when it comes to firefighting helicopters. What is really evident is that it's not always one mission for one fire alone. These missions evolve very quickly, very rapidly, and you need the agility with the helicopters that are deployed to be able to really change from, transporting some firefighters to providing some reconnaissance, or to a command and control, to also bucketing or using retardants to control the fire. All this happens very quickly, and you need this sort of a multi-role aspect when it comes to using helicopters in that domain for you to make an impact. If you saw what transpired in LA, again, there's a lot of external factors that play into it as well. So it requires a lot of coordination, a lot of sharing of best practices, and only if it all comes together can you really have a successful scenario in curtailing the fire and controlling the damage. I just wanted to present this to you guys just to get a sense of what are the different types of helicopters that are used in terms of firefighting. So this is, on the top, is basically what the US Forestry Services uses in terms of the category of helicopters used in terms of fighting fires. So there's basically 3 categories: Type 1, Type 2, and Type 3. So Type 1 are the bigger helicopters that you see fighting fires, generally with the large capacity between 700 to 3,000 gallon capacity to use for bucketing water, for dropping water or retardants. Then, of course, you can, with those bigger types, also carry more people. And there's generally a larger useful load available in the bigger helicopters. But they are just one part of the ecosystem. If I was to give you some stats in terms of how many Type 1 helicopters are used for US forestry alone, the average over the last 10, 12 years when we looked at the stats was about less than 30 Type 1 helicopters used. But then, when we looked at the stat in 2022 just for US forestry, those Type 1 helicopters used was more than 100. That also then gives you a sense of, again, what we are seeing in terms of fires becoming larger, more rapid, and longer. Then there are the Type 2 category helicopters, in which you have between 300 to 700 gallon capacity in terms of the carrying capacity for water retardants, 9 to 14 people in terms of what you can carry. And the number there for exclusive use for the US is only about 30. And then there's some call when needed on top. And then there is the Type 3 category. And these are, generally speaking, the largest number of helicopters used in terms of the fleet. I think I'll skip that because I'm running behind schedule. But here's just to give you a summary in terms of what are the different equipment types that are used on the helicopters. So there are helicopters that use on a long line a bucket to drop water. There are helicopters that are fitted with belly tanks. Then there are sirens, cable cutters, all sorts of other equipment to make the pilot's life easier, like bubble window, so that they have their eyes at the right spot. That we see all across our product range and also other helicopters that are available out there to effectively fight fires. I just wanted to also mention to you that we are growing our product range to include even drones on that sort of a mission. There's a picture of Flex Rotor, which is part of our portfolio. So this particular drone has an endurance of depending on the payload, between 12 to 14 hours, where this can work in conjunction with our helicopter fleet to provide that initial reconnaissance and surveillance, which aids firefighters to plan. And just to tell you that there is still a lot of work to be done when it comes to really modernizing the fleet for fighting fires, not only in the world, but here in Canada as well. To summarize, if I had to say a few things in a little provocative way in terms of what we really need in Canada with respect to this, we don't even have a national agency to fight fires in Canada. Then there is a fleet which is pretty old. In fact, the average fleet for utility helicopters in Canada is 37 years old. So with that, you don't get necessarily the right technology, the most modern technology, to be able to tackle this increasing problem. Then, we are seeing some restricted category helicopters come into Canada, whereas there are civil certified helicopters that are there that can do this job effectively. And with that, we are kind of coming up with a double standard in terms of certifying helicopters between what the Transport Canada norm is and what is being let in. Operators actually need more government support. I mean, Alberta probably increased their tariffs for operators for forestry last time 10 or 12 years back. And then enough said about the advanced technology. There is technology available that is deployed on helicopters in different missions, but we just need to bring it also in terms of fighting fire as well. So I think I'm over time on that. I'll take questions afterwards. So thank you for your time again.
Thank you, Mr. Serene. That was very interesting. On to our third speaker. Paul Spring is CEO and Operations Manager with Phoenix Heliflight, Inc. Paul began his decades-long experience with wildfires as a helicopter AME at the Keene Creek, Alberta fire in 1980. Licensed as both a fixed-wing and a rotary-wing pilot and AME with over 15,000 hours in the air, 7 successful auto-rotations, and 49 years in aviation. After years of working for Associated Helicopters in Fort McMurray, Paul used his vast experience in wildfire work to start Phoenix Heliflight in 1991. Not long after starting Phoenix, Paul was introduced to the science and art of aerial ignition. Under the mentorship of aerial ignition pilot Bill Bereska, Paul gained a reputation as the go-to pilot for aerial ignition operations in Alberta. Paul is still actively flying and ready for his next wildfire challenge. Please welcome Paul.
Thank you. Okay, got to figure out the tech here. Welcome, everybody. Glad to see you out here on a Thursday night, hearing about helicopters and wildfires and aviation. My biggest thank you goes out to my high school girlfriend, then wife, Andrea. It's her birthday today, and she let me come and talk about aviation instead. So happy birthday. She's been a summer aviation widow for most of our life together. She knows that I'm going to go out and fight fires, and I'll be back when I'm back. So that's just the way it's evolved. Okay, so that picture there, pretty telling. The forest fire is about to overrun our hangars in Fort McMurray in 2016. So we brought our medevac machine in to grab all the flight suits, helmets, medical supplies we could find because we knew we were going to be staged away from base for a while. But still providing medevac services, now not for the community they'd evacuated, but for the firefighters that were rushing in to help fight the fires in Fort McMurray. There you go. So helicopters are the Swiss Army knife of aviation, of firefighting. And the really big Swiss Army knife, if you had one younger, you wanted the one with the scissors, the tweezers, the spoon. We had all that, the really big fat one. We take all the jobs we do normally out in the commercial sector, aerial construction, reconnaissance, mapping, moving people, search and rescue, medevac. We put that all together really in the firefighting environment. Nitin had mentioned some of the categories in the US and Canada. You can see on the slide, we have the 4 basic categories on fires, which is the light helicopters, Bell 206, the smaller ones, smaller helicopters, older. Usually the intermediates, like the Bell 407, the A-Star series. Then we get up to the mediums, which are Bell 212, Bell 205, some of the older Vietnam-style helicopters. And then when we get into the heavies, we're talking about K-Maxes, Sikorsky S-61s, 64s, now the Pumas, so a 225 or a 332, and so on, and even into Chinooks and like 214 STs. So all the jobs we do up there, I'm just going to go through them all, sort of give you a basic lowdown. I'm looking forward to the question and answer session. I could talk for the next 8 hours on helicopters and aviation and wildfire. but I'm really interested to hear what you folks want to know about. So I'll go through all the categories, what we do, and answer questions later. So pre-suppression is the activities before a fire starts, and we're involved in all sorts of pre-suppression stuff every spring. Like you see this picture here, we're putting a brand new cupola on a lookout tower. Alberta still utilizes a series of fire lookout towers. Some provinces have gone to patrol aircraft instead. Alberta uses a mix. And I'm going to talk mostly about Alberta, even though I fight fire all through Western Canada. Alberta is where I spend most of my time in this role. Lookout servicing, those people have to get there in the spring to open the tower. They have to have their food and drinking water brought in, taken out for medical appointments, et cetera, et cetera. We have a radio network all through the province that has to be maintained. Some of them are very remote sites that are run by solar panels. They have to be up and running every year, remote weather stations to keep the inputs coming into the data center so we can figure out what HFIs, the head fire intensities are, and what our depth moisture codes are, fine fuel moisture codes, all the components that go into deciding where to deploy aircraft and when to hire aircraft. Lightning detectors, very important. They triangulate lightning strikes so that we can concentrate our patrol efforts on area of the highest probability of a start. Rain gauges have to be read at the beginning of the year so we know what the moisture level is in the spring. And of course, helicopters don't run on good luck and daisies, they run on fuel. And once you get out fighting a fire, you're going to need fuel close by. You can't be taking an hour to go get fuel and then come back. The fire will be taking off by then. So fuel caches are stashed all through the forested area, usually at lookout towers, so the crews can come back in and get refueled for their next mission. Once you get into suppression, our roles kind of switch over. Then we've got incident command. Most of the provinces are now running the incident command system, which is a standardized hierarchy for any disaster. It could be fire, flood, anything. So you have reconnaissance for the team that's making the decisions on how best to attack a wildfire. Helipad construction, when you get to a fire, there's no places to land. The first place you find is usually the only swamp in the area with nothing that'll hit the rotor blades. And then after that, you're going to want something drier and easier to access, so the crews will get in, start building pads around a fire area perimeter so the helicopters can get into doing crew moves and logistics. Equipment delivery, fuel delivery, and then at the end of the fire, all that hose, all those pumps, all the hand tools all have to be moved back off the fire and back to the warehouse for cleaning for the next fire. This is a typical picture of a fire crew loading up a net. So the two gentlemen are standing on a nylon or poly cargo net. They're loading up a load of bags of fuel hose and pumps and all the parts that go with a pump kit, and that will be picked up by a helicopter and slung out to the fire line to supply the crew that's working on the fire line. So an example of interagency work. There's some Ontario firefighters working with an Alberta supervisor and one of the pads that was built on the edge of the fire after suppression efforts started. And you can see in the background there behind the gentleman that white pile of things are called melon rolls. That is fire hose that's been rolled back up kind of in a melon, and it will be taken back for cleaning and then rolled up in a nice organized roll for reuse on the next fire. Crew transport, big role for the helicopters. The crews don't, crews don't live on the fire line. We'll typically set up, if there's road access near the fire, set up a camp nearby. If not, the crews will be flying back every night to the nearest accommodation, a camp or a town or a village where something has been set up, and then taken back out to the fire every day. Let's say a BC crew loading into a Bell 205, heading back either out to the fire line or back home at the end of the day. And protection of trap lines and cabins, anything out in the woods. You can see a crew here from Ontario. They're setting up a sprinkler system on a trapper's cabin, and we'll set up a pump in a nearby lake. It's already, the sprinklers are active, and they will check on that every day just to make sure that that gentleman or a family does not lose their trapline cabin. Bulldozers play a big role. Whenever bulldozers can be used, nod wells with water tanks on the back, any tracked equipment, and they have to be refueled. So all the diesel fuel that's keeping those dozers going and the lunches that the operators eat and the crew moves for those operators are all supplied by helicopters coming in and out, as well as the dozer boss flies around all day, keeping an eye on his bulldozers and directing them on where to go and what he wants them to do to help secure the fire line. So this is a satellite track of a helicopter out. I've got a few satellite track slides just to give you an idea of the day we spend in the air. And this is a division supervisor just reconnaissing, doing recon flights on the fire that we're on. This is the Fort McMurray fire in 2016. So it moved from the left of the screen there through town and off to the right. Fairly big fire, had many heads on it, and you can see the highest concentration of coloring there are circles. So the helicopter was doing orbits. There's something interesting there for the division supervisor. It's probably directing ground crews or looking at access, and we spent time going around in circles and then back to fueling location, which are the bottom red dot or the top red dot were the two fueling spots we had that day. So as mentioned earlier, lightning is a big big cause of the fires. We do see lightning maps. It's not unusual to have 50 to 150,000 lightning strikes in Alberta and BC in one afternoon. You can end up with hundreds of fires at the end of the day. But if you don't get fires that day, it doesn't mean they're not going to start. Sometimes they sleep for a while. They get under a conifer tree that protected them from the rain that came with that thunderstorm and lightning. That spark will get at the base of the tree, it gets into the duff layer, the old needles, and it'll smolder there for days, protected by the branches on the tree. It will eventually move off and start spreading as a smoldering ground fire. And sometimes when these fires come up, it's hard to believe how large they are on initial detection because the trees have protected them, and then we get a hot, windy day, and the fire jumps up, and there you have it. So loaded patrol is a big part of what we do in initial attack. So we have an initial attack crew that could be dispatched to go fight a fire that's just been detected. But if we don't have any fires detected that day, we'll go out and do what's called a loaded patrol. So we have the 4-person IA crew with about 300 pounds of gear, a water bucket for the helicopter, and enough fuel to stay out for about an hour and a half. And we'll go look for fires. And if we don't find any, we sit down and maybe 3 hours later go out on another tour. We also do assessment. So the people in the office, if we have 80 new starts in an afternoon, have to know which ones to go after. So values at risk play into that, whether it's humans or in industry, and the types of trees. A conifer type of tree will burn a lot faster than a smoldering fire that's at the base of an aspen stand. So that's a typical initial attack fire. Get there, find the smoke, do a circle, do what's called a white message. So we'll call into the office, tell them what they have for tree cover, whether it's C2, conifer stand, or another type of stand that'll burn slower. The slope and aspect of the fire, and then carry on and start fighting the fire. And that's a larger fire. You can see the black smoke column has started, so this fire is about to turn into a crown fire, which is going to make it a lot tougher to fight. So then we can expect that more resources will be dispatched to help out this helicopter crew. Likely bombers will be launched and a second helicopter. Happy looking fire crew. We just got that fire out. That was the first EC-130 ever to fight a fire in North America, or the world probably. And a native fire crew out of Fort Chippewa in Alberta. Bambi buckets, you saw a lot of Bambi buckets. This is a Canadian invention. The buckets before this were hideously heavy and hard to use. This is one of the best inventions ever in firefighting. And you can see they're not that small once you start standing them up. Some of them weigh hundreds of pounds. But once you fill them with water, they puff up nicely, and a great firefighting tool, one of the real advantages we have. Again, this is a water bucketing mission. And you can see the machines are going round and round and round in circles, dumping water, collecting water, dumping water, collecting water. We will do that all day long for about 10 hours and stop for fuel about 4 times. Nobody ever gets to have lunch or go to the washroom. You just keep fighting fire. There's an S-61 with a bucket on a larger fire. This is Fort McMurray in 2016, and you can see the fire sort of in the middle there is creeping up on some buildings. Luckily, there was a beaver dam nearby. The hydrants had all gone dry in town from fighting residential fires, so the helicopters were brought in. You can see the action where they're going up to the upper part of the screen there, upper left-hand part of the screen, and going back to a beaver pond to get water. Managed to save that industrial area, only lost 1 building on the edge. As mentioned, there's belly tanks and bombing. So you can see a picture here of an S-64 with a belly tank on it. You can see the hose hanging down. And it has an operator, crane operator area that looks backwards. I'll give you a view from there. So that's looking backwards behind the cockpit, and that big hose in the middle is sucking the water out of the lake into the tank. And that is retardant coming out of the tank onto a fire as the bottom of the tank opens up. This is 9.6 hours of circles. We also do a role called HELCO, helicopter coordinator. So we fly around in a smaller helicopter doing orbits, directing the larger helicopters how to fight the fire. And after doing left-hand circuits all day long, you get home and you're still going around in circles. It doesn't stop, and they never let you go the other way. It's always left-hand. Aerial ignition, as mentioned, is one of my favorite things. This is using fire to fight fire. It's a really valuable technique. In this case, it's a heli torch using jellied fuel that ignites coming out of the torch. We also use what are called ping pong balls, which are really good in the shield country because they stick around. And it's a ping pong ball with potassium permanganate inside. It's injected with glycol, which causes that ping pong ball to start on fire about 30 seconds later. There's a good view of the torch under a 130, tank of fuel and ignition system. We always use roads as tie-in points. So over the years, I've sat on a lot of roads waiting for a lot of fires to catch up and then jump on them at just the ideal moment. And there's a perfect example of bulldozers working to make a cat guard, and then when the winds are ideal, it took 8 helicopters with torches to burn in 52 miles of fire line on a 1 million acre fire near Mariana Lake in 1995. Very successful burnout. Mapping and reconnaissance was mentioned. This is a helicopter with a camera, FLIR camera and mapping system on it. We use several types of these cameras. There's lots of different ones out there, side mounts or nose mounts. And in this case, you can see some of the technology in the cabin with the pilot. This machine's just going down to Jasper last year to do an infrastructure damage assessment of all the power lines and pipelines in the area around Jasper so that they could start planning the rebuild. Getting people to evacuate, sometimes they don't want to leave their homes. What these folks didn't know, when I'm down there talking to them saying, you got to go, the only road out of this subdivision is now in fire. It's down the valley. So they're at the houses thinking they're going to be okay because they're in the blue, but all to their escape route is fully burned over. So we eventually evacuated a whole pile of dogs and cats and kids and adults. We did not take the lady with her 8 ducks, though. They went by river. And unfortunately, helicopters and airplanes working fires, long days, hard work. And I'll say I got 2 crash pictures. Both pilots survived. And in both cases, fuel exhaustion. It's a day where you get so busy and they keep throwing more tasks at you and say, can you do this, can you do that? Sometimes you get a little preoccupied and you can run out of fuel, then those people need to be rescued as well. Again, the gentleman in this helicopter survived. Also, the pilot of this aircraft, a Saskatchewan tracker that ran out of fuel and ended up in the trees. Very tough airplane. Well built, and the pilot walked away from that one. But when they don't walk away, we're ready to help them fly away still in a horizontal position. So medevac's a critical role whenever. And we can have chainsaw accidents out on the line, axes, falling trees, hitting people. Unfortunately, there's a memorial coming up soon in Edson in Alberta for a firefighter that the province of Alberta lost last year. And that's going to bring it to an end. As I said, Swiss Army knife or multi-tool. We can do it all for fires. It's the most important transportation vehicle out there in wildfire fighting. So look forward to your questions later. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. That was really, really fascinating. What a career you have had. Lots of great stories, which I'm sure we'll hear later. Now, our last but not least, our final speaker. Jawet Wong is the chief pilot for Stinson Aerial Services. Jawet has been flying for 7 years and has spent his past 5 summers flying drones to help respond to wildfires. He leads training for all Stinson pilots to operate drones beyond normal operating limits under special flight operations certificates from Transport Canada. Jawet learned to fly during his time as an emergency program specialist for the City of Victoria, responsible for emergency management. Jawet is also an international humanitarian aid worker, working with the Toronto-based NGO Global Medic, and has responded to humanitarian crises worldwide. He is also an urban search and rescue specialist and trains with a search canine for the BC-based Search and Rescue Dog Association in Victoria. So Jawet also has some interesting stories to share with us, so I'd like to welcome him to the podium.
Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for coming, and thank you to the museum for this opportunity. So I just want to start off by reading a land acknowledgement statement as well. I want to acknowledge that the Ingenium Center and our three museums are situated on the traditional and unceded territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation. We appreciate being able to work and learn on this land. We are grateful to all the Indigenous people we have worked with throughout Ingenium's history. We are committed to supporting, uplifting, and deepening these relationships. So this video has been sped up 3 times. It's from the drone itself, and it's a little misleading because we work exclusively at night. So you can see the videos during the daytime, but we did stop for this fire because it was beyond what we were responsible for, and we needed to capture the data points for it. So what you see in the larger video is the color camera capturing color video. In the bottom right is the thermal camera that's active, and it's capturing heat signatures, which are indicated by the white dots or the white blobs on the screen. So as you can see how effective a thermal camera is in detecting heat, even during the day. Working at night, the reasoning behind working at night is what we're looking for is thermal contrast. So the difference between the hottest hot and the coldest cold gives the camera operator the best opportunity to spot hot spots in a wildfire or any hot object. So using the ready, set, go mentality, I'm going to walk you through how our company or how any drone operator authorized by BC Wildfire Services in BC gets deployed. So the wildfire season typically starts in April. Not every fire requires a thermal scan. The incident commander on each fire can request a thermal scan by a drone or helicopter by filing a service request through the incident command system. The video you're seeing is just an example of how ferocious a rank 5 or the highest activity fire can be. You can see the embers feeding off of the burning trunks, and they spread for kilometers. And given the right conditions, whether it's drought or enough fuel, dry fuel, the fire can spread quite quickly. So in the ready phase, it's the off-season. We're doing off-season planning for the wildfire. We're going through our after-action reports and pilot reports and looking for ways to improve our workflows, the computer work. We're training. Flying at night, flying wildfires takes a lot of training. We're also working on other client projects. We don't exclusively work for BC Wildfire. We have a lot of First Nations clients, land management, industry, forestry projects that we work on. And we also do have an education arm to train pilots in training to become basic and advanced pilots through Transport Canada. So the 2 pictures you're seeing on the right are the same picture. Again, the top is a color camera, but we're obviously flying at night, and all you can see are the headlights kind of right in the middle of the picture. And in the bottom is the exact same picture, but it's taken with a thermal camera. In this case, the white is indicating higher sources of heat, but the red that you see is the highest source of heat. So you can see the hood of the engine. To the rear of the engine, or to the rear of the truck, is a generator that we run to provide power, and the red dots at the front of the truck are people, or the drone crew that are operating the drone. In the set phase, we've received a request for service. So BC Wildfire, an incident commander has requested our services. We're one of 4 companies that are authorized to fly wildfires in BC. We arrive within 24 hours, and we get a briefing from the incident commander or their designated person. We sign in and we receive safety briefings and operational briefings. So safety briefings are wildlife activity, a classification of the fire itself, what rank the fire is, emergency procedures if one of us happens to have an accident. Operational briefings are more related to the fire itself. What does the incident commander want to see from the drone scans, whether it's a perimeter scan, so just flying around the fire, maybe a couple hundred feet on the inside and the outside, or whether they want an entire scan of the fire, so the interior of the fire completely scanned. Again, these pictures are all the same picture. The top picture is the color picture that a color camera would capture. In the bottom picture in the bottom left picture is the thermal camera, but you can see there's a red object. That's actually a deer, and it's the hottest thing in the picture, so it's indicating as a red object. And the bottom right picture is a zoomed in picture of the deer itself. I'm not sure if you're able to make it out there, but there is a deer there. So during our operational briefing with the incident commander, we received what's called a fire perimeter. A fire perimeter is often given to us in a shapefile. For people who know computers, it's a KMZ or a KML file, and we load it into our laptops, and we get what you see up there on the left. The fire perimeter itself is drawn in red. It indicates the outer perimeter of a fire. The picture on the left is a complex, so there's a series of fires within the same region, making it a complex fire. And what we do is we convert the KML that we've received from the incident commander into what we can feed into our drone controller, and we get an image or a map file that you see on the right. And we use that to fly the fire itself. We fly manually, so it's a pilot constantly controlling the drone. We don't automate our missions. We find that we find more hotspots that way, and it's an added degree of safety rather than relying on automated flights and the sensors themselves on the drones to avoid collisions. In the go phase, we're actually deploying. We've loaded the truck. We've done our internal safety briefings. We've ensured there's communications in play, whether it's a radio check-in or we have satellite messengers to check in with our company and with dispatch. Safety first and always. If we determine that the fire is too dangerous or there's no access or egress points that we can use, we'll have to reassess the fire itself, and we'll have to go back to the incident commander, and whether we insert by helicopter or by ATV, it's for further discussions, but safety is always our primary concern. If it's not safe, we're not gonna do it. Again, we fly exclusively at night because we're looking for that thermal contrast. It gives things in the environment a chance to cool down at night. Usually, sometimes we're in the midst of a heat dome or a heat wave, and things in the environment can still be quite hot at night, unfortunately, making our job that much harder and relying on the camera operator, the payload operator to focus in on the job that much more. Again, we're looking either at a perimeter scan or an area scan. So a perimeter scan, we're flying a couple hundred feet inside and outside of the perimeter, looking for hotspots or embers that have escaped the fire line. An area scan would be the incident commander wants us to fly the entire fire itself. So depending on the size of the fire, it may take several days to complete an area scan of a fire. And we work on 14-day rotations. So we can work for 14 days in a row, and we have mandatory 2 days off. So depending on the size of the fire, or whether it's a complex fire or multiple fires in the same area, we can be on the same sets of fires for 14 days in a row or beyond. And if we hit that 14-day mark, we have to do a crew rotation, and we'll swap out crews from who are fresh from the office. So this is the drone that we use. It's called a DJI M30T. DJI is the manufacturer, and M30T is the model. It's a fairly compact drone, and it's meant for emergency response. So everything on the drone itself folds in on itself. So the battery case and the storage case is quite small. You can see 3D rendering on top, and on the bottom two videos is actually myself going through pre-flight checks, checking the drone, and actually taking off on the right-hand side, bottom right video. So this is what the pilot sees. This is actually the controller. I did a screen capture before I was able to hand in this presentation. On Thursday, it was a yard burn day, where we're allowed to burn yard waste in the municipality that I live in. So I recorded a screen capture of the thermal imaging camera in play, and I've been switching between the color camera and the thermal imaging camera. What you want to take note of is there's a lot of moving numbers. The drone itself is in a hover position right now, so not a lot of numbers are moving. But as a pilot, you have to be aware of a lot of data coming at you, the telemetry, the wind speed, what the camera is telling you, and of course, being aware of your surroundings. As you can imagine, a lot of wildfires happen in remote areas, so whether you're working on an active road or you have to be aware of wildlife, there's so much information coming at the pilot. Not only is it draining to work overnights, the information mentally is quite draining. So we constantly rotate pilots, and we're also doing check-ins with each other, asking if they want to switch off or they want to take time off, sit in the truck and warm up. Ironically, sometimes wildfires happen in remote areas at high elevations, and it can get quite cold just standing there flying a drone. So at the end of the night, this is what we come up with. In the middle there is a map. It's what's called a geo-referenced map. So what a firefighter does is they load it onto their phone, or they download it when they're in Wi-Fi range or cellular range. And it's actually a PDF file, anywhere between 5 and 10 megabytes, so fairly small. And they load it into a program that will turn that phone, even if it's offline with no Wi-Fi or cellular reception, into a GPS tracking. And they'll appear as a blue dot on the map if they're in the area. And their job will be to go to every red dot on that map. I don't know if you can make it out, but we did a perimeter scan, so all the red dots are within probably 400 feet of the red line. And it's the firefighters' jobs to put out to find the hotspots and then to extinguish them. Also, helicopter pilots like Paul can bucket water onto using our hotspot map to narrow down where hotspots need to be extinguished. Again, the video has been sped up 3 times, so they're not actually flying that fast. And then in closing, wildfire drone flights are some of the most challenging flying a drone pilot can perform. I'd like to impress upon you that drones aren't just a toy. Yes, they are a toy. You can spend anywhere between $50 to sky's the limit for drones in terms of the ruggedness and what applications you're using. Obviously, military drones are on the higher end of cost. The drones that we use run anywhere between $15,000 and $20,000. And then, of course, you have to equip them with batteries, charging stations, and so on and so forth. But flying at night beyond line of sight and in very challenging conditions is very trying. So not just a new pilot it's not something a new pilot can do on their own without a lot of training and practice. Wildfire drone flights, there are many hazards, environmental factors, the mentally draining capacity of the constant information that's coming towards a drone pilot. And one of the major hazards is driving. Sometimes there are no accommodations, or we have to travel long distances to get to the fire, and then at the end of the night, we have to travel that same distance back to our accommodations where we're within Wi-Fi range to create the geo-referenced map for firefighters and to deliver the map to the firefighter's email inbox in the morning. Drone pilots who fly wildfires must be knowledgeable and experienced. But at the same time, despite all the dangers and hazards, it can be some of the most rewarding work. I've seen places very few people have seen in British Columbia, and there's just so much of BC that I didn't know was out there before I started flying. The video it's kind of hard to make out, but this is what a drone pilot can see. It's 2 videos combined. There's a left and a right video. And that's literally all you can see as you land. There are landing lights that come on as you approach approximately 10 meters above ground, and they do light up. But as you're landing, you can only see the truck if we've left it running. Its tail lights. Sometimes we use scene lighting if we know we're going to be there for a while. But as you can see, it's quite challenging to land in wildfire conditions. On the right-hand video, it's landing again at night, but it's hard to see, but there are clouds of mosquitoes. It's another environmental hazard that we face. And for one reason or another, the mosquitoes are quite attracted to me. So my teammates love it when I'm with them because I'm the guy that gets bit. And this is my contact information and our company's contact information if you'd like to talk to my boss and complain about me or what have you. But this picture on the right is one of the first pictures I've ever took on a wildfire. It was during my first season. I had no idea what I was getting into. It was quite a harsh season. I had no idea what to expect and what conditions we'd be working under. We're driving into danger, so the picture is quite symbolic and it's quite meaningful to me. And just like to thank you for your time again.
Thank you so much, Jawed. So we're now going to move into the question and answer period. So I'm sure you all have many burning questions that you would like to, had to do it. That you would like to ask our presenters. So I'm going to invite them to join me on the stage up here, and we will begin. Okay. You're going to have to wave because these lights are really intense. Okay, we've got a question.
I have a question for Spring, I think. So when you have a bunch of helicopters that are not dedicated to fighting fires, how do you kind of rally the crews? Just like send text messages and then show up? How does that work?
We have our pilots on shift, so we're on what's typically a call when needed contract. So with Saskatchewan, Alberta, BC, so they know what we have available. We send in availability lists to our local fire office, or if it's Edmonton, they want to send you down to, say, the Gap or somewhere down south. They call and see what you got. But we always have a group of pilots on staff ready to go. Our deal is that in fire season, they usually don't come in till 10 in the morning. We like to start the day later because we are restricted by flight time duty day regulations in Canada. And typically, the firefighting helicopters go out around 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning, but you could stay out till 10 o'clock at night. So if we had to get more guys going, we would, but typically we have 4 or 5 pilots available all the time.
Other questions? So Jared's going to be running around with microphones so that our friends online can see.
Valerie's first. Oh, it's over here. We gotta speak over there. Sorry, sir.
My turn.
Go ahead.
You saw some interesting country that you work in. I once spent about a year, 1 month in Red Earth Creek.
I know it well.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. Anyway, what's your general operations? Are you going across to Abasca and over towards Manning and Rainbow Lake, or are you going more east up to L'Orange and La Loche and that?
Wherever the call comes in first. So if it's in the province of Alberta, we'll be dispatched usually if it's out of our forest area, which is the Lac La Biche Forest. The request will come out of the Provincial Forest Fire Center in Edmonton, and they'll move us. We could go down to Pincher Creek, or they could send us up to High Level. So we never know. But we also get requests out of the Fire Center in Prince Albert to go to Saskatchewan, and then British Columbia is in 4 different fire zones, so you could get requests to go to British Columbia as well. As we look after some of the southern part of the Northwest Territories, so that Fort Smith area that burnt pretty heavily the last couple of years between there and Yellowknife.
Not fun. Joe, you should go to Rainbow Lake, Alberta, and you'll find mosquitoes.
No, thank you.
So where there's fire, there's smoke, and there's wind over here. Smoke and wind, and so how does that impact the operation, both on the drone side and helicopters?
John, you go first on drones.
Wind, yeah, each drone has its wind limits, weather minima, so we do have to be very aware. We carry an anemometer, and we use judgments. If it's too windy, again, safety first, safety of the drone, safety of the crew. So if as a crew we determine it's too windy, we're gonna ground the drone and wait out the wind, hopefully. And if not, we're gonna have to call it a night and pack it in. The smoke, the drone can operate through. We're allowed to operate beyond visual line of sight, so it's not a problem. It doesn't really affect the thermal imaging system that much, so not a problem there.
I think for us, wind, we will reach a limit eventually. You start getting up in that 40 knots, 40 gusting 45 range, it gets pretty hard to do anything. If you remember the Slave Lake fire years ago, we had to quit that day. The winds were just so strong we couldn't fly effectively. And just everybody took the helicopters and got out of town. We knew the town was going to burn. So got out of there. Smoke, again, we'll fly down to about half a mile in life-saving mode on a fire. Alberta's standard is to stop operations when visibility gets below 1 mile horizontally. And that's because you're in the airspace with other helicopters. So the systems are getting better. We're hoping that there's a rule coming in Canada for adding ADS-B. Transport Canada's been pretty slow to push it, but we may see Alberta Fire push it ahead of time and make ADS-B mandatory so that all helicopters and all fixed wing can see the other aircraft around them. And we're already equipped for it and ready. It's a great system.
Hi. First of all, thank you very much for your presentations. They're fantastic. I expected to hear a little bit more about drones and fire suppression. I'd like to know your thoughts on heavy lift drones, swarms attacking fires.
Yeah, sure. Since ourselves, we don't handle the suppression side. We're strictly intelligence gathering for the hotspots. But there's a lot of work on the suppression side of heavy lift. Swarms, yeah, you introduce a lot of variables when you're flying multiple drones, especially in a wildfire situation. And swarms typically are smaller drones, so that means less water. So I've not done any research or read into it myself, but I question the efficacy of a swarm of drones suppressing a wildfire. Believe the key would be a heavy lift helicopter dumping hundreds of gallons.
We should talk. We have a solution for that.
I'll just add to that aerial suppression, as much as it sounds like we're putting out fires, aerial assets don't put out fires. Ground crews put out fires. We slow them down enough and make it safe to work. So I don't think in all my years of flying helicopters I've ever put a fire out just with a load of water from a water bucket.
And if I can add to that, what we are also seeing is that drones and helicopters work in tandem. What we're calling manned-unmanned teaming or crewed-uncrewed teaming between unmanned aerial systems and helicopters. That's starting to emerge as well.
Hi, Erin. We have a question from some of the folks online.
Okay, sure.
Paul, this is a person named Leslie who says she knows you from Shelburne High.
Wow, there's some reach. Good job, Ingenium.
Yeah. So her question is, what is the most important thing that normal people can do to make your jobs easier and more effective? So I guess this is to the panel.
You want to go? Human.
Maybe we start with you, Dr.
Oh, with human factors.
You had the
in
stats on
fires.
human-caused fires. They're still
The
out there.
human caused fires. Well, I'm not a fire manager. I'm a fire scientist. But some of the you did mention something about the fire danger rating system, and so we do measure the weather, which then gives an indication of what the fire danger is. So when you walk, you drive down the highway and you see that sign that says the fire danger is low, medium, high, extreme. There's a bunch of models that we've created behind that are essentially based upon weather variables. So when when the fire danger is high or extreme, and it's Fire Management Agency has said no bonfires and people need to be careful. I think people really need to pay attention to that, because as we said, 50% of the fires are caused by humans, and so that we can really reduce that some of those fires from occurring if we pay attention to that information that's given out by the fire management agencies.
And I think.
I thought your graph was very interesting, because you could see in 2020, when we were in the midst of the pandemic, that marker was very, very low. So it was like nobody was outside doing anything.
Yeah. So part of that too is the education portion of groups like FireSmart, which is prevalent in many provinces, and that's teaching people about how to clean up around their homes to stop sparks. You saw the video from Jowd of the sparks flying through the air. A lot of the urban wildfire interface problems we've had are sparks coming into a community, and whether it's landscaping or dry material on the ground that help propagate these. And if you've got enough wind, as we learned in McMurray, once houses get on fire, they just start spreading to the house next door, and it's a domino effect. So anything that a homeowner can do or a property owner can do to remove those fine fuels through fire-resistant landscaping materials. Forget the dried up wood chips, go with gravel. Those are making big headway in making our communities more resilient to fire.
That's a great point.
Along the same lines, are there any changes to building codes in these boundary areas that are going to either
Absolutely. Unfortunately, we had the experience in Fort McMurray. Our son lost his home just near one of the slides I took. That was his community burning. And when we rebuilt it, so houses are further apart now. So we changed the shape of the rebuilt house, put it deeper in the lot, made it a little skinnier. If you are close to another house, you have to have a fireproof wall on one side. They're changing siding materials, roofing materials, and now the green belt, which everybody loved having trees and squirrels and owls and everything right up next to their house, that has been pushed back. And the city has made a buffer zone around the city to give an area to help fight fires if they come again, which they will come again.
Hi, thank you very much for your presentations, all four of you. Dr. Haynes, I'm just curious, concerning forest management in Canada, especially concerning fires, how are we doing? Are we getting better? Are we getting worse? What keeps you up at night?
Oh, gee. Well, in terms of forest management, I think we're starting to get somewhere, because I think forest management and fire management, which have typically been very siloed, are starting to talk. And there's a recognition that, you know, we can use forest management and we can start to look at the fuels, and we can start to identify ways that we can modify the forest through forest management to reduce, particularly, like, we're not going to do this across the entire landscape, but around communities. So we can start to reduce some of the fuel loads and try to augment the fuels in ways that will reduce that fire behavior, so that, you know, we may get a surface fire that is much more manageable versus a full crown fire, in which our suppression resources and our options become much more limited depending upon how that fire is behaving. So I think there's some hope, but we still have a ways to go. We're doing better, but we're fighting climate change. So the fire weather is becoming more intense. And so that, you know, we're seeing a lot of, you know, a number of people mentioned more intense fires, longer fire seasons. So there's a lot happening, but we're not going to suppress our way out of that. That's one piece of the tools in the fire management toolbox. So we really have to start to look at mitigation, things like Fire Smart, what individuals can do, what governments can do, and forest management is one of those pieces of the puzzle as well.
This question is for Jawed, rather, and thank you all for your presentations. But what's the autonomy typically on and it's a battery-operated drone or a multi-battery? So what's the autonomy with the battery, one set?
Set of batteries on the M30 can last anywhere between 20 and 30 minutes, just depending on whether it's fighting the wind or working with the wind, and how much movement we introduce into the operation, whether we have to investigate a hotspot, lower, raise the drone, so on and so forth. So between 20 and 30 minutes.
Okay, and then the second part of that question would be, do they have an auto return to base if the battery gets below a certain level or distance?
Yes and no. So it calculates the time remaining on the battery, but once you introduce environmental factors such as headwind or tailwind, that safety margin may or may not make it home, but it does have an RTH, return to home function, once it drops below a certain battery percentage that you can change.
Thank you. Yes, I'd like to reiterate the thanks for your presentations this evening. They're brilliant. I work at the British High Commission. I have an earlier career in maritime aviation. So my mantra through life is helicopters, you can never have enough of them. My question, however, is what determines whether you use water, foam, or suppressant on the fires, and how easy is it to roll change mid-flight or mid-9-hour shift or whatever?
Okay. Typically, so in the IA role with the light and intermediate helicopters, it's typically water only, because we're going to have to find a water source at the fire initially. So if your initial attack, typically with the rotary wing, it's water. We do have some foam injection systems we can use, which gives you a longer staying time in the water, but on an IA fire, the object is to keep it from becoming a crown fire, keep it on the ground, and support your ground crews after you knock it out of the crowns, back to the ground, support them with direct drops. When you get into a fire that's in a long-term suppression mode, then you've got time to set up mixing sites for the heavies who can then snorkel retardant if you're building line. So it sort of depends on road access, turnaround times, and the stage the fire's at, whether it's a large fire that you're going to be fighting for a month or whether it's going to be out in 2 days. The ducts will typically, CL 415s, most of them are turbine now, typically have a foam injection system on board. And the bigger bombers like the Electras and some of the airliners and Dash, the Q400s now are showing up as belly bombing aircraft, typically are loading at a base and getting retardant. So they're building fire line, and that's when the fire gets there, they don't want it to chew through it, versus helicopters that are usually direct attack. And I like your comment, more helicopters.
Okay, obviously fires aren't adhering to borders. What kind of interprovincial conflict or cooperation do you see? Does jurisdiction ever come to play where you're limited in what you can do? Are there arguments over funding, prevention, blame, any of those things?
All the above. But the first job, like medevac, first job is to look after the task at hand. The provinces out west have a what's called a border agreement. So if we go 10 miles, if we're in Alberta, we're allowed to go 10 miles into Saskatchewan and 10 miles into the territories and 10 miles into BC and fight the fire and send them the bill. They can do the same on our side. So if they come into Alberta, they can do the same thing. It gets a little trickier in our area because we have a federal park. We have Wood Buffalo National Park. The park is, they try and maintain it as a natural ecozone. So they will let their fires typically burn right up the edge, and if they come into Alberta, they just hand it over and say, here, it's yours. So it's better now. You know, Fort Smith was under siege 2 years ago, last year almost again. I think there's a lot more awareness of that, but again, it all depends on how well the agencies have liaised prior to fire season and set up their communications lines ahead of time.
Just to...
I don't worry about funding. People fight a fire. Well, somebody will pay us. But that's the theory anyways.
Just to add to that, so within Canada, we have something called the Canadian Interagency Forest Fire Centre. And so CIFC is essentially a broker of resources. So say Ontario is now depleting they're using all their resources, and now they need to import. So they will then put out a call to the other provinces and territories to identify what the need is, whether it's aircraft or hose or people, and they will then put that request out, and then whatever province is not busy or territory could then export to that province and vice versa. So, and then we get to a point where like in 2023, where the entire country, we'd used all the resources we have in the country, so then the federal government then starts to look internationally, and that's when we start bringing in crews from other countries. So there is sharing, province to province, and there is agreements between certain provinces, you know, that you don't have to go to CIFC, but eventually you can go to CIFC and to be able to share resources around the country.
And I think I said that in my wrap-up, that one of the things that we're seeing, like on the US side, if we were to look at it, about 10 years. Yeah, I know. I agree. I agree. But on this, what we have to see is the US Forestry started a modernization of US Forestry fleet about 10 years ago. And basically, they're incentivizing new technology to be part of this firefighting effort. We are not seeing that yet on our side, on the Canadian side. What that does is then, you know, you have some of the legacy fleet, because Paul mentioned in his presentation that a pilot is, you know, up there fighting fires 10, 12 hours at a stretch, you know, just constantly refueling, going again, right? And then we didn't talk about, but there's also start of night firefighting capability, because fires are not going to wait for that if it's day or night. They just keep going. With that, you need certain different set of equipment that you need in the helicopters, NVG and some of the other equipment. And today, what we see in our country is that we're not incentivizing that modernizing of the fleet. And we are just using that old legacy fleet over and over again. And that's where reliability, availability sometimes becomes a question mark when the resources are stretched to the maximum, like you mentioned in 2023. So we do need some effort there from the government side as well for us to just expedite this change.
Get rid of the Waynes and the Buffalo Joes. Gets
Well, the herd is thinning on its own. We need more pilots. What we're really finding right now is, and we've got pilots in our organization. We have 26 pilots on staff, I think, this year. And some of them never want to fight a forest fire. They say, nope, put me on any other job except fires. They don't like them. And I don't know, so we need to get more young women and men involved in flying helicopters. There are helicopters on the ground every summer that could be out helping communities that don't have anybody to fly them. They're just sitting. And it's our industry's own fault, but thanks to things like this, Ingenium, maybe the word gets out, we get some people interested in the career path and get some more folks in it, because I'm going to hang it up eventually. Can't do this forever. So yeah, congratulations to you guys for spreading the word that this is happening out there, and we need people. We need mechanics and pilots.
Not the use of a vertical takeoff, landing, fixed wing, longer endurance, larger ball payloads, what capabilities?
Yeah, so the model that we use is called a quadcopter for propellers. What that allows us to do is to investigate the hotspot, whereas a fixed wing, you have to stay in constant motion. So you get one pass at that hotspot. Was it a hotspot or not? So our pilots and our payload operators, they can investigate the hotspot. Is it a hot rock? Is it a deer, or is it actually a hotspot? So, sorry? I guess so, but with heat signature, your best reading will be directly above nadir, like a gravitational center towards the hotspot. So it just gives us more control over being able to investigate that hotspot.
Just to highlight again the spectrum of technology that's available there, there are drones available which will take off vertically and then fly like a fixed wing with additional, endurance and reach as well. But again, it comes back to, you kind of need all kind of, aircraft, drones for that full ecosystem. What is the most efficient is what the agencies have to take a call on, right, for their own domain.
I have a question here, and you mentioned helicopters and drones working together. Not everybody's equipped yet with ADS-B. Who is responsible for air traffic control when you have like a lot of different aircrafts in the air? Who is responsible for collision avoidance in this situation?
It depends on how big the fire. So if it's an initial attack fire and we've got, say, 4 helicopters and a bomber group there, the bird dog from the bomber group will assume command of the airspace. So they are the de facto air ops boss as well as leading in their bombers. So the helicopters will generally be grounded or excluded from the bomb run area. And as soon as the bomb run is over and the bombers go back to refill, whether it's ducks heading for a lake or a Q400 heading for the airport, the helicopters will come in, the bird dog will jump up to about 5,000 feet and become airborne air ops at that point. If there's no bird dog there and it's just a bunch of helicopters, it's see and be seen. I'm proud to say with our fleet, it's very modern, not so much the airframes, but the instrument panels. So we're over onto Garmin, the evolution of Garmin H500 into TXIs now. We have Garmin 800 traffic systems on board the aircraft. All of our transponders are over to ADS-B now. So I've been out working fires, and I can see everybody around me that's transponder equipped. It'd be better information if it was ADS-B, but we'll take what we got. But it doesn't work perfectly. Last year there was an incident where a 412 cut the bucket off the belly of an A-Star, and the remaining amount of synthetic long line on the A-Star was 26 feet. So they were 26 feet away from a fatal for both crews, and neither one of them knew it. The A-Star pilot thought he lost his bucket, snagged it, and the 412 was still fighting fire and had to be told to return to base. He'd had a midair and didn't know it. So lucky. So there's still a matter of luck going on out there, and that's why I say push for ADS-B. I hope it's in every contract for every call we needed aircraft, and we can start seeing each other in the smoke.
I have a question. Thank you so much, everyone. Those were so incredible, the presentations. My question is, how has your work, Paul, changed with some of the stuff that Joet's been doing over time? Have you seen your role changed, or do you ever get to work? Have you ever worked together? And also, I'm very excited, hopefully afterwards we can talk more about that Bambi bucket, because as a curator at an Aviation and Space Museum, I look forward to maybe bringing in pieces like that for the future. But thank you, everyone.
Okay, so there's two parts to that. There's the Bambi part. So with the drone space, to answer a question from the side of the audience, we're not there yet with the drones. We would hope that the federal government would come out with the new drone legislation. I think it's the 900 series of cars. We're looking forward to it. It'll help us. On fires, we don't really need it because it's closed airspace. Every fire is an automatic NOTAM, so it excludes every aircraft except firefighting aircraft. So therefore, like Jowett said, we can get a SFOC, a Special Flight Operations Certificate, and we can go do the fires. So didn't want to mow Jarrett's lawn, but we have in our company, we're going to drones now. We see them as a complementary technology. We have a drone called a TechEver AR3, can stay up for about 8 hours. And we were cleared last year to scan a fire at 9,000 feet, which is great for us because we'd like to be at that altitude because our camera's powerful enough that we can focus it down. The higher we are, the better a swath we see. Our problem is data processing. We're not quite there yet. We hope to be there this spring. But we're already $2.5 million of investment in and haven't seen a penny in revenue yet. So it is a very leading edge, bleeding edge technology at this point. We see a future in it. It's going to take some of the jobs from helicopters. We're hoping it takes the jobs that we never wanted to do anyways. And they can stay up night. Working nights is inside your window of circadian low. I'd rather be in bed. So as much as we have night vision helicopters now, I won't be flying one. And for the Bambi bucket question, yeah, the buckets before the Bambi bucket were hideous things. In the audience here, one of the gentleman asked a question. It's my former operations manager from Saskatoon, Al. He knows what we used to deal with a Griffiths water bucket and a water boy. They were horrible pieces of equipment. So the Bambi revolutionized aerial firefighting, and yeah, you should probably have one on display.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi. Thanks for the presentation. And I have a question, I think, regarding the ADS-B stuff. So if you don't know, like, and you said the airspace is close to everybody else, then if the drones are flying in that area, would there be a chance, if maybe Joet's company and Paul's company, you both are working in the same area, one is doing the drones, the other one is doing the helicopters. So would there be a chance of incidents in that case, or there is time allotted that this is a time for helicopters and this is a time for drones?
Typically, like Jawed said, they fly at night. Better time, you get better contrast on the thermal imaging. We are seeing night tankering right now. One of the pictures that Nitin had was Talon helicopters out of Vancouver. They have a Dauphine with a belly tank and MVG capability. We have 2 aircraft set up for scanning at night with MVG. The airspace would be restricted to the drone or the helicopter. It will be mutually exclusive. So there's no way a Forest Service operations and incident commander is going to allow both aircraft in that airspace at the same time. That said, I know with our package, our unmanned aerial system, we have ADS-B out on the aircraft so helicopters can see it. Are you using transmitters on yours?
The DJIs have ADS.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you had a system on the helicopter, you would see it anyways.
Okay. And would you face an issue where there will be people from news channel or somewhere else trying to get their drones in the area while you're trying to deal with the wildfires?
Well, we saw that in the Pacific Palisades fire this year. A Quebec government CL-415 was struck by a drone while trying to fight that wildfire. The FBI did catch the individual involved, who was extremely wealthy and extremely knowledgeable and had lost control of the drone apparently. So yeah, we face these problems every time we go fight fires now. We're on the lookout for drones. If there's a unknown drone in the area, it grounds all aviation assets, fixed wing and rotary wing. Everybody's told to return to base until they get the drone out of the sky. So they are a huge hazard.
Okay, and I think I have another last question for Joy. So you said that, the drone flies for about 20 to 30 minutes, right? And then it comes back to base for charging. So how many drones would you typically take on your 14-day trip? Like, you said there are people working for 14 days and then they need a 2-day break. So how many drones would you take and how much is a charging time for the drone that would be discharged?
So we solve that problem by having multiple sets of batteries. Typically, 5 sets of batteries will allow us to be constantly in the air. The 4 sets are on charge or waiting to be used, and then there'll be 1 set in the drone, and then it's just a cycling of the batteries. We carry a backup craft, 2 M30Ts. If something were to happen to the first one, whether it's mechanical or a crash, we have a backup drone with us. And if something happens to the backup, we would have to have another aircraft or 2 dispatched from our base in Courtenay to wherever we are.
Look at you. All right, rapidly coming over.
For our friends online.
Yeah, I was going to say. The question I had just was, you mentioned that fires are needed to, in fact, allow trees to reseed themselves and grow further. I'd read somewhere once that fires are getting hotter, but I don't know how that can be, and is actually destroying, it's gone beyond sort of regeneration of the forest, in fact, just destroying it permanently. Is that true, or is that just...
I don't know that they're necessarily getting hotter in the sense that, the intensity, but what we are seeing is greater number of fires that are extremely intense. So fires that start to create their own weather, which are called pyrocumulonimbus events, where you'll see this towering column and you're getting like lightning coming off these fires. And in Canada in 2023, we saw a record number of those types of fires. So it's not necessarily the intensity that one pixel, but it's all this larger areas burning, and so there's just more contributing to that fire, and it's becoming extremely intense. In terms of like when you're getting fires happening in communities, I think that that's a whole other ball game in terms of houses burning and this sort of thing. But that's something that we as the wildfire research community have just started to integrate with those in the structural community to understand, what's going on in these areas. But yeah.
Just say, we're starting to see some of those fires, we call them sterilization fires because the ground does not come back. And with the fires happening more often now, we're seeing cases where fires that I fought 40 years ago, we're refighting them in the same place. And the dead and down material, it looks like pickup sticks laying all over the ground. They have now become the forest floor. You've got 30, 35 years of regen on top of it. Again, in a pine, usually pine stand or a spruce stand. And when you get another fire in there, it's usually typically in a sandier type of soil environment, you get a very intense ground fire from all that material that's laying on the ground. And we've got an area north of Fort McMurray that for the last 20 years has not grown anything. It just became sand. So you can, and the moisture level in the ground is going down and down with continuous drought years. So the fires are burning deeper into that duff layer, which causes some of that permanent loss of the vegetation structure.
So I guess this is for Paul. So in the smaller helicopters or medium-sized helicopters, it doesn't look like there's room for a lot of crew to fit everything else in. So apart from the odd pilot who says he doesn't want to do fires or she doesn't want to do fires, is a helicopter pilot expected to be able to run a camera and put a stretcher in and out and figure out a search pattern for rescue and everything?
Not on the fly. So there's a mentoring system, and the Forest Service in Alberta, at least, I can talk to them because I know them firsthand. They have a mentoring system now where they will allow us to take along a second pilot as a trainee with a crew. Now, it does restrict our fuel load. In a smaller machine like a B2, you might be challenged for fuel. In a B3 or a 130 or a 407, you may have the power to do that. But typically, your career path in fires will be you have to have 500 hours of pilot and command time to be eligible to fight a fire in Alberta, which is a pretty low barrier to entry. So those typical jobs would be reconnaissance mapping, the periphery of the fire, the stuff not the initial attack or direct attack jobs, and then you'll grow into that. But I know with our company, we teach everybody how to water bucket. We teach them about fire behavior techniques and safety. So yeah, it is a bit of a trial by fire kind of thing. You get out there and you've never fought a wildfire before and you've been trained, and now this is your chance. You gotta come. And I had lots of failures when I started. I couldn't hit anything when I started fighting fires. And the old guys would just shake their head, oh my God, you kids, you don't know anything these days. So we all go through that. Doesn't matter what your career is. I think everybody starts out learning as they go. But the industry is ready to teach those people. The end users are ready for them to join our group. So we're accepting and willing. They will get trained, and we'll teach them.
So we have about maybe 4 minutes left now, so probably time for 2 more questions. And Jared's got one up there.
Do I take it? Dr. Haynes, could you make some comments about, first of all, there's a satellite coming, and I think I'd like to ask you to talk about that, and I'd like you to say a few things. I come from the remote sensing world, and there's been some wonderful work done in government labs that people on the outside never hear. I'm talking about NRCan, CCRS, not just CFS. Can you talk about a little bit about those two things, please?
Sure. So yeah, the one thing in terms of, so WildfireSat, I'm assuming that's what you're talking about. So WildfireSat is a satellite that will be, so it's folks that I work with down the hall from me at the Great Lakes Forestry Center in Sault Ste. Marie. So it will be a satellite that is infrared based, and the difference with it, that satellite, to other satellites that currently exist is it will be stationed over Canada such that it can detect, monitor, and detect fires at peak burn within the northern regions. And so that should be launched in 2029. And then what was the other question that you had around?
The other question was around the research that's gone on in government labs, and as I said, CCRS, other parts of the government, other parts of CFS.
Yeah, so there is a lot of remote sensing work going on in addition to what's going on with WildfireSat. So myself and other folks are interested in using the remote sensing to look at moisture. So before things start burning, so what are the moisture conditions? As you mentioned, moisture is a really important piece in terms of, in the forest floor. What are the moisture conditions helps us predict what fires, when they will happen, how they will burn and such. So we're doing a lot of research around just remote sensing in general in terms of both moisture, the condition of the forest in terms of greenness, when the season's going to start, which, we start to pay attention to things like snow. We wouldn't think that snow is really important for fire, but when the snow is gone, that's when the fires start. And so we're trying to, improve our estimation of snow and how that influences drought, because drought influences fire. So there's a lot of many different pieces of the puzzle that are important in terms of remote sensing and the use of satellites to improve our abilities to look at fire in different aspects. Hopefully that touches on some of the bits you were interested in.
Thanks a lot.
Emily, did you have a question up there?
Hi, folks. Thank you all again for the presentation. So tonight we heard a lot about the importance of research, proper equipment, skilled people, and advanced technology. So with a federal election likely being called on Sunday, what is one thing that each of you would like to see being talked about on election campaign trails in regards to forest fires?
No comment?
That cuts to the quick. All right. All right, why don't we start, Jawed, at your end, and we'll make our way over this way.
Can I say no comment?
Definitely. No pressure.
Personally, I guess, it's drive home the fact that climate change is real and that we're in for a challenge. It's going to require research, it's going to require boots on the ground, it's going to require an entire ecosystem, like Nitin said. So, I'd like that to be driven home.
Paul?
More dedicated funding. So most of the helicopter pilots don't know if they'll fight fire every year. The crews that we fly around are typically university students. It's a summer job. And if we have a fire season that extends into October, like you mentioned, I fought lots of fires in October. All those firefighters that we were working with went back to school at the end of August. And there's nobody left. So it's not considered a job. It's not considered a career. As opposed to the US, where they have dedicated crews that this is their job. They fight fires. That's what they do. So if there was funding for it, federal funding flowing to provincial areas of expertise, provincial funding, to have at least a dedicated group of people that you could count on year after year, that would probably help.
Yeah, I think I'll echo the same. Basically, wildfires is a reality, it's growing. And we need to be conscious of that. And we don't need to hope that what happened in 2023 will probably not happen again. So we need to be prepared for that. And that means that, again, it's easy for us, me representing Airbus, to say this, but these are the people that are fighting fires, right? And they need to be equipped in terms of technology, in terms of funding, in terms of resources that are needed, because this is not going away. This is going to only increase. We are the second largest country in the world. We have a lot of land mass. We have a lot of conditions that are really ripe for fires over and over again. We just need to equip our operators, our agencies, our scientists, and anyone else that is in this ecosystem to make sure that we are ready when the time comes.
I'm an employee of the federal government. But they have not dropped the writ yet. But just personally, I think, echoing what each of the folks before me have said, climate change is real, and it is causing a lot of these problems. And I think a lot of us within fire are talking about a whole of society approach. We can't do this, each of the individuals. We need the public. We need the public to understand what is going on. We need the public to play their part. We need, work on retention and recruitment with fire management folks at the provincial and territorial level. That's a big issue. It's a complex issue, and we just really need to put some. And there is effort going on, definitely, and so there is some funding being injected in, but. It's not going away.
Okay, well, I think that is a good spot for us to leave it for this evening. Thank you so much for all of your questions. That was a very engaging session. I would like to invite you to join us in the lobby for our reception, which will last about an hour, and have more time to chat. So thank you so much.